Hi, this is Randall, that's me. I'm making this video because it's become painfully obvious to me that most people who get into guitars, either for the first time or who've even been playing for a while, don't have the foggiest idea about good tone, what makes good tone, and basically they don't even know how to pick a good guitar. So this video is to help you guys with that. So I'm going to show you some of my guitars, and I'm going to tell you what I've done to improve the tone. Because everywhere I go when I play, people are always impressed with the tone of my guitars. I don't have cheap guitars, but I don't have top-of-the-line guitars. But everyone to a person says that my guitars sound as good as or better than guitars that cost 2, 3, even 4 times as much. So take this to heart, because a lot of you so-called experts aren't experts, but I really am. I've been playing for years. I have a good ear. I also have taken luthier courses. I know how to build guitars. I know what makes a good guitar tick. I know how to pick them, and I know how to improve them. So enjoy. This isn't for the faint of heart. If you're one of those people that thinks you know it all already and you know, are locked into a brand name, you're beyond help anyway, so I can't help you with that. So for the rest of you that have an open mind, enjoy. Okay, here's just part of some of the guitars I have. I've got about 18 or 20, I've lost count. But they're all really good guitars. And for those of you whose to a name means something, it shouldn't mean all that much. But anyway, there's a Breedlove. There's an Alhambra Spanish guitar. There's another Alhambra Flamenco guitar. There's a Larrivee Cutaway Dreadnought. There's a Yamaha RBX7 bass. There's a Godin Exit 22 electric. A Godin Multiac ACS. Another Godin Multiac there. A handmade Yamaha Classical. And a 42 or 43-year-old Norman Dreadnought. These are just some of the guitars I have. They're all good guitars, and now I'm going to explain what makes a good guitar. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this guitar. This is the first good guitar I bought. I bought it when I was 17. I'm going to be 60 in a few months, so do the math. That's how long I've had this guitar. I paid about $800 for it. I guess that would have been around 1976, probably before. It's probably older than a lot of you people. I picked this out in a store over a Martin, a Gibson, and a Guild at the time. This is a Norman guitar. It's the 13th Studio 55 model that they ever made, if you're not familiar with the history of Norman guitars. The Godin Guitar Company was founded by Robert Godin and Normand Boucher, and this is their 13th good guitar that they built. What's so great about this guitar? Everything. It's got a solid mahogany back and sides, book matched. If you don't know what book matched is, look it up. I'm not going to give you a lesson on that. It's got a spruce book matched top. A rosewood bridge, rosewood neck, yeah, and sorry, it's got a mahogany neck, a rosewood fingerboard, and I've got an ebony John Pierce armrest on it. I'll explain why. And it has ebony bridge pins, and it has a bone nut. Nut. This is a nut. Not me, well, I may be a nut too. And a bone saddle. It's got real good Shaler German machine heads as well. Okay? And the tone on this thing, I don't use coated strings. I think they're junk, and I'll tell you why. I use D'Addario. These are, I think, extra light phosphor bronze. The tone on this thing is simply stunning. It'll make your hair stand on end. Okay? So, A lot of people buy coated strings. I'll tell you they're junk. They're junk because they coat the strings to increase the shelf life in the store. Humidity will make them rust and stuff. And a coated string simply looks nice, okay? It's like wrapping it in plastic. But some of the coatings, especially those on clear tone, really are hard on the frets. Plus, anything that coats a string is going to muffle the tone. It's just a fact of physics. So the first thing you have to do, a lot of people when they'll play an expensive guitar and they'll think, oh, there's something wrong with it. It's probably the strings, and it probably isn't set up properly. The action has to be set for how you like it. These are things that you know, a good guitar shop will set it up for you before you even buy it. If you're really interested in a guitar, say, look, I want you to set the action. I want you to put the strings on it that I use. Strings, you know, strings, it's personal taste, but you know, you have to develop a good ear, and then it goes from there. Now, every place that the string contacts the guitar is critical for the tone. That's why you use either tusk, which is an artificial bone and it's very dense, it's not plastic, or bone, which is very dense at the nut. That's why you use bone or tusk at the bridge, at the saddle, and that's why you use bone or ebony bridge pins. $4,000 or $5,000 Martins come with plastic bridge pins. It's a joke. You're spending $4 or $5 grand on a guitar. Your bridge pin should be at least, you know, $30 ebony pins or $50 bone pins. The only manufacturer I know of that puts decent pins, standard from the factory, on their guitar are Larrivee. He uses bone. So good for you, Jean, a good Canadian builder who now is in Oxnard, California. All right, that's the only thing that's acceptable. It has to be dense, right? The other thing that affects the tone a lot, you have to have good quality machine heads. Shaler are impeccably good. Grover, there's some good makes out there. That's, again, sometimes it's look, sometimes it's personal taste. But the machine head is what holds the string in tune, and they've got to be good. They've got to be, you know, a high ratio, good gearing. These are sealed gears. These are 40-some years old, people, and in perfect condition. Now, the next thing that affects the tone, probably the biggest thing aside from the good woods. Now, a lot of people say that you have to have a solid back and sides. That's not really true. The Godin Guitar Company makes some laminated, three-piece laminated backs and sides that they're really good guitars. There's a slight difference, okay? I do believe that a solid piece of wood sounds a little better, but that might even be a bias on my part. I really don't notice that much of a difference in sound. There is some, but if it's a good laminated back and sides, it's not going to affect the tone nearly as much as the top, which has to be book matched solid top, and the finish. A lot of people buy guitars with high gloss finish. This came with a high gloss finish, but Godin from the get-go used nitrocellulose and didn't put it on too thick. I scraped this finish right down to the bare wood and put on my own French polish, which is shellac, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute or two. But the biggest reason most guitars, even expensive guitars, sound like shit in a guitar shop is because if it's glossy, especially if it's a Martin or an older Taylor or a Gibson, they put way too much finish on it. Sometimes they even use polyurethane, which is death to a guitar. Imagine having sex, you know, with your partner and putting on 6 to 12 condoms on your penis. Good luck with trying to feel anything. Same thing happens to a guitar. What most people don't realize is that most original guitar makers were first cabinet makers or automotive body workers, and the finishes they used were designed for cars. Well, you don't drive this thing, you don't sit on it and, you know, crank her up. It's an instrument, and the sound, the tone is what's important. So if you've got too thick a finish, you get cabinet scrapers, and I'll show you in a minute what a cabinet scraper is, and you scrape it off. Some guitars that I've scraped for people, I've scraped, I'm not exaggerating, a pound. It'll fill a big mixing bowl full of garbage finish, which just kills your tone. All right? So I'm going to show you what a scraper is and how to use it now. These are cabinet scrapers. These particular ones are good. I got them from Lee Valley. They're made out of French saber steel. They're very thin. There's a whole process to sharpening them. but you get into that. And basically what you do, you take your American or Chinese or Japanese guitar that has way too much of that crappy finish on it, and you go with the grain, you put a little bow in this, you get a razor sharp, and you scrape the finish off. You do it everywhere. So you take the strings off, you take the bridge pins off, you take the headstock off, and you just scrape it. Scrape it right down to the bare wood, or almost the bare wood, if you're too much of a chicken to go right to the bare wood. And then you can use some real fine grade wet dry sandpaper to get the finish right off. Okay, if some of the new finishes, like on the Larravees, Cole Clark's from Australia, the Breedloves, all the go down guitars, they're not over finished. So they have a new UV process which puts about 3 or 4 micro thin layers on. They're fine, you don't need to touch them. But most guitars that are more than 4 years old or 3 years old, you have to scrape them, and you'll be amazed with how they sound. That high gloss finish, unless it's one of the new finishes, is useless. Okay, so get a scraper, learn how to use it. It takes about if you're scared, try it on a cheap guitar that you don't worry about too much, and get good at it, and then you'll have no trouble scraping your guitars. Scrape it all, the finish off everywhere. Go with the grain. It takes a few hours, and then you put on a couple of coats of French polish, and I'll show what French polish is. Da, 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 da. So this here is the ingredients you need for making French polish. You get orange shellac flakes. Shellac is an excrement from the shellac bug in India. They excrete this stuff to protect their eggs when they lay them on the trees, and the Indians go and knock them down with big long sticks. And most of you have eaten shellac. If you like candy glacette raisins or peanuts or chocolate coated almonds, that's that shiny coating on them. It's shellac, it's edible. It's not shit. They excrete it from a gland to protect their eggs. And you dissolve it in shellac thinner, which is a methyl hydrate alcohol. Don't drink it. And you play around with it. You put in a few flakes, and you put in a couple ounces of alcohol, and you get it to a nice consistency that you can work with. The more flakes you put in, the thicker it is and darker it is, the less flakes. I recommend using less flakes and putting on a couple of thin coats. And don't buy a cheap brush. This is a $20, $30 brush. Get a really good brush, because once the shellac dries, you just stick it in alcohol, it dissolves it, and you can keep the brush forever. So just have a brush dedicated for that, and just brush it on, or you can rub it on the old-fashioned way. You just take a cotton padded cloth and rub it with the grain. Let it dry overnight, and then use 600 grit wet dry sandpaper on it. Put on another coat. Use some more 600 or 400 grit if you got it globby in places. And then after you put on about 3 coats, what I do is I go 4, 6, 8, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, and you wind up with a beautiful mirror-like satin finish. You can get high gloss if you rub shellac really hard. I don't like high gloss, so I don't go high gloss. So it will improve your tone, and the nice thing about shellac is it's easy to repair, whereas these new finishes like the UV finishes, they're impossible to repair really. What I do, if I get a ding in a UV finish, I sand or scrape the area down, and then I put shellac on it. It blends really well with the wood. Okay. Heavy glossy finishes are for collectors and people that like to see with big egos, that like to see the reflection in their guitar, which has a real negative impact on the tone. Another thing that really negatively impacts the tone is not having a proper guard, and the best guard I've found, or rest I've found, is the John Pierce armrest, because they're made of boxwood or real ebony or rosewood. The nice thing about it, it just attaches along the binding, so it doesn't attach to the soundboard, and it's 3 millimeters off the soundboard. So when you play, you're not deadening the vibration of the top by having your forearm rest on the board. Your forearm is actually The armrest takes the weight of your forearm and distributes it along the sides, so it doesn't affect the tone. And you have a real nice, lively, bright tone. It's akin to if you strum your guitar without touching it. You know, if you hold it like this and touch it, and then strum your guitar and put your arm across it like this, and you'll hear how muted it becomes. And I'm just blown over by how many people don't understand the simple beauty of getting a decent armrest. It doesn't detract from the looks of your guitar, and your guitar will sound twice as good instantly. Okay? Worth their weight in gold. They don't come with a nice beveled edge, so I just put a beveled edge in with a cabinet scraper, and then I use a good sealing oil like Rubio, which is a micro thin coating, and that's all you need. Okay? I'm just showing you my fretless bass here because here's what you can do if you have a limited budget, is to just spend a few bucks and wind up with a guitar that sounds and plays like a guitar that costs 3 times as much. I really like this guitar, this fretless guitar, but it had crappy pickups because it was only a $500 guitar. So I put really good Seymour Duncan pickups on it, and I scraped it, and I wound up with a guitar that sounds like it's $1,500, $2,000. I scraped all the finish off this because even on the electrics it makes a difference. You can tell the original color of this was black. I left it on the headstock to show, but I scraped everything down, the neck, back and sides, replaced the plastic cover with brass, and this guitar is sweet and it just sings. Plus I think, you know, there's nothing like the natural beauty of the wood. This was filler from the factory. I left it there because I scraped it right down, and I put a couple of thin coats of shellac on this, and this thing rocks. And I've done that with all my electrics. The only one I haven't done it with, and I still might when I get to the point, I bought a $600 Godin here. This is my beater guitar I play when I do rock gigs in bars. And you know, it's just, I kept the finish on it because it sounds good enough. It would sound better, yes, if I scraped the finish off. But you know, if it gets a beer spilt on it or something like that, I probably won't have a conniption. This is a Spanish-made Alhambra flamenco guitar. Alhambra make very nice guitars, but they put a little too much nitrocellulose finish on it. Nitrocellulose is a good material, but if it's too thick, it affects the tone. So I scraped this right down, and you can see it still is a bit shiny because I put a little bit of extra shellac on it. But it sounds, I mean, it was a good sounding guitar when I bought it, but it sounds like way, way better now. So, you know, best thing you can do for your guitar, if it doesn't have a satin light matte finish or one of the new UV micro thin finishes, scrape it off. Have some balls, scrape it off. This is the only high gloss guitar I currently have because it's a new one. It has a very thin finish, so Breedlove has told me. It's a real nice Breedlove, sounds great. But if you notice, it's got a myrtle wood back and sides with a satin finish, and they told me not to bother scraping the top because it's really thin. But I still might take 600 grit sandpaper and dull it because I just don't like the high gloss. But I tend to agree with them, as much as I usually hate high gloss finishes. This guitar sounds exceptionally good and bright right out of the box. Resonates like forever. So if you got a guitar like that, great. But even this guitar, which is $2,500, I had to lower the action and put my strings on it. And you know, it sounds way, way, way better. Like I say, my guitars sound great. Some of that has got to do, most of that has got to do with the choice of woods. I'm very fussy when I pick a guitar, and I don't care where it's made or who made it. Everything's in the sound and the playability. As far as I'm concerned, for under $1,000, you can't go wrong with anything made by Godin. If you're not familiar with Godin, he's a manufacturer out of Quebec, Canada, and his lines are Godin Electrics, Simon and Patrick, Seagull, Art and Lutherie, Norman. I think I got them all. Those are his guitars, and they're excellent value for under $1,000. For under $1,000, I don't know of a better guitar out there. The only thing I do change on a Godin product, and I have 7 or 8 of them, that's how much I like them, is I change the pegs, the bridge pins. I put in ebony ones. I like ebony. They're easy to work. They're less expensive than bone, and bone may crack on you over time. Nice thing about Breedlove, doesn't need bridge pins. So really nice guitar. I'm not biased. My favorite guitars, if you want to know my favorite guitars, are anything by Godin. Larrivee guitars are great. Breedlove and Cole Clark's, and for the Spanish guitars I like Ramirez and Alhambra, although they do put too much finish on. Get a Ramirez and Alhambra, scrape the finish off, and you'll have a guitar that sounds like a $10,000 custom job, and I'm not kidding. Got nothing against Martin and Gibson and Fender, except that they really gouge you you're paying a lot for the name. You're not getting a better guitar. Some of the Taylors are real nice. Some of the Taylors are overpriced. In my opinion, you can get a guitar just as good and sounds better from Larrivee or Breedlove or Seagull, and you know, save yourself. With that other $1,000, you can buy another guitar or a good amp. And you know, glossy finishes, they're let's be honest, they're for morons and collectors. So hopefully you're a player and not one of those goofs with more money than brains. And hearing is believing. I'm telling you. That's tone. So screw the name. I'm not saying you can't get a good Martin or Gibson, but you can get way better guitars for less. That's just my opinion, and of course it's my opinion that counts because this is my video. So hope that helps. If you have any questions, I'm very open to them. And keep playing, and good luck, and pick out a good guitar. You might even have a really good guitar. The only thing you might have to do is change the strings, fix the action, take off that crappy gloss finish if it's got too much, put on some real bridge pins, and then you'll be amazed. Hearing's believing. I mean, if you care more about how a guitar looks and how it sounds, seriously, dude, what are you playing for? Have a good day. Oh, silly me, I almost forgot one of the most important things is about tone. Tune your guitar to 432. A equals 432 hertz, not 440. 440 was brought in by Goebbels and the Nazi propagandists. It doesn't ring true. 4 of the 12 natural notes don't harmonize properly. 432 tuning was developed by Aristotle. Pavarotti and others insisted that their bands play to that. Classical music was written at 432. It's about 1/3 of a tone lower than 440, for those of you who just tune with your ear. So it sounds a little flat to people that are used to 440, but it's less stress on the guitar and it's more harmonious. Dogs and animals like it better. Chickens lay better eggs. The beef tastes better. They eat more grass. 432 is where it's at. So ditch 440, unless of course you're a Nazi and, you know, like to control people and screw with their minds. Oh yeah, hi. One thing I forgot, I found some mixed shellac I had lying around, just so you know, and a smaller brush. I used both these brushes for shellac. This is 1.5 inch, my other one was a 2 inch. They both work well. But this is what it looks like. You have to shake it up and let the flakes dissolve overnight, or sometimes even for a day or two. But anyway, if anyone's interested in really getting great tone out of their guitar, you can contact me, and I'm going to make some videos that you will have to pay for that will show you exactly how to do all this stuff, because I'll have to take one of my guitars, probably that electric Godin, and disassemble it and go through the process, which is a lot of work. Right? So, and also I forgot to mention one of my other favorite makers. They're a little pricey, but Boucher, which is out of Quebec as well, they make really nice guitars. But you know, they're about $3 grand. I have one on order, so when I get that, I'll maybe post a little video with that. maybe I'll play something. In the meantime, keep the faith. Go get a scraper if you've got some nerve. I can understand why some people might be a little trepidatious about taking a saber steel scraper to an expensive guitar, but if it's got a thick finish on it, it's worth it. Just be very careful. Bye for now.